fourth grade art friends, it's Mrs. Herbay. Today we're going to be talking about the second part of our overlapping parallel line project. So last week I taught you guys how to draw parallel lines in a variety of different types of lines, and we also talked about how to overlap those lines. This week we're going to talk about the negative space shapes that were created by the lines you drew. So believe it or not, this area in here created by these overlapping lines is actually a shape. It's not a traditional shape, but it's more of like an organic type of shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to think about the colors that we add to these shapes created by our parallel lines. So this is a finished example that I did, and if you notice, I used, to start with, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to think about doing warm colors. So I played around with the warm colors, and then once I finished in here, I thought, all right, there's a bright yellow, I'll continue with warm, and then I decided, you know what, now I want to switch to a different color family. So I chose to switch to cool colors, and then I kind of experimented with that up in here, and then I continued the warm over here. So we're going to talk about some different color family options that you can use, and then you're going to have the opportunity to decide how you're going to color your background and go ahead and do that. The best thing to use probably for this is colored pencils, but if you don't have colored pencils, you could also use markers, and I'll kind of demonstrate for you how you could do that as well. Okay, so here we go. All right, guys, so I have the finished example from last week with the Sharpie, and you'll notice, hey, wait a minute, Mrs. Herbay, there's some color in there. And I had played around with adding some different colors to this example, so part of it is already filled in. But before we get started, what I wanted to do is kind of reintroduce you guys to some of the color families that we talked about last year. One of them, like we talked about earlier, when I showed you my finished example, was the warm color family. And that is the reds and the orange, yellows, and pink. Okay, those are our warm colors. And then our cool colors are our greens, our blues, and our purples. Okay, and last year we also talked about primary colors, which are, as you guys know, red, blue, and yellow. And we also talked about secondary colors, which are so if we mix red and blue, we get purple. If we mix red and yellow, we get orange. And if we mix blue and yellow, we get green. So those are our secondaries, okay? There's also the colors in the order of the rainbow, so the Roy G. Biv. That's a color thing that we could talk about. And I also want to talk about complementary colors, because complementary colors look really nice together. They complement one another, and they are colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel. So I don't have a color wheel right here, but I can tell you blue and orange are complements, yellow and purple, and red and green. Okay, so with this in mind, you can think about, oh, and there's one more thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, and that is monochromatic. So those are colors, so that would be a particular color family, so it would be like red, light red, orange, red, that kind of thing. So colors that are a little bit lighter or darker, and you could even kind of mix in another like red orange or red violet. That would be monochromatic. And then there are also colors that are analogous. And those are colors that kind of run together on the color wheel. So for example, in addition to being warm, red, orange, and yellow are also analogous because they're together on the color wheel next to each other, sort of in a row. Also, yellow, green, and blues. Those are analogous colors. Or you could pick it up here and say greens, blues, and violets. So with all this in mind, you guys can sort of think about, do I want my my finished piece to have lots of bright colors? Do I want to experiment and see, maybe if I just choose pairs of complementary colors throughout? Maybe you want to do a mix of warm and cool. Maybe you want to try it with just primary colors or just secondary colors or primary and secondary. It's totally up to you. And so I just wanted to kind of throw these ideas out there for you to kind of see, to get you thinking about how you wanted to do it. So you just maybe didn't just start to randomly start to color your background. All right. If you are using colored pencils, the great thing is that with colored pencils, we can get dark and light values, which means if I press harder with my colored pencil, I get a dark value. And if I press lighter with my colored pencil, I get a light value. So I'm going to grab a few colors here. And then we'll get started. All right, guys, we're going to get started. And so what I did was I pulled the 3 complementary pairs to kind of experiment around in one of these shapes here. So this is one of the shapes that is created by our overlapping parallel lines. You can continue your color, your backgrounds into other shapes. They can spill over into other shapes, or if you want to, you can do something different in each of the different shapes. That's also an option. So for example, I'm going to start by coloring with yellow down here in this bottom corner, and it's a little bit tricky without kind of bending the edge. But I'm just kind of coloring sort of like a back and forth. Okay, and then I'm going to grab my violet. And the cool thing is you can kind of overlap the colors a little bit. You can also experiment around with dark and light values. I'm choosing to do dark values because I want to have my background be kind of vibrant. You can choose how much or how little of a color you want. So I kind of colored that in there like that. And maybe I just want this particular shape to have purple and yellow. And then just for fun, I sort of have this light violet color. You can also overlap colors if you wanted to. I'm kind of playing around and seeing what that looks like. Now you kind of have a choice here where as you go on, like I talked about, you could carry this violet over into here, or you could choose to leave this purple and yellow experiment stay right in this shape. It's up to you. If I chose to leave it right in there, maybe in the next shape, I'm going to experiment around and see what blue and orange look like. So I'm going to grab my blue again, you can decide how big or how small you want your bands of color to be, or the areas that you color in. And then I'm going to take my orange. And my blue. Okay, and so that's one option where you can experiment with complements. Over here, when I got started, I kind of was playing around with sort of this turquoisey green and red color. I tried overlapping them. It got a little bit darker. And then I started just kind of playing around with, then the red went into the pink. And then I just was playing around with colors that I thought looked nice together. So that is also an option where you can just kind of see what you think and kind of let the picture kind of talk to you as far as how you're going to fill it in. Another thing I can show you is if you do not have colored pencils and you only have markers. I'm going to grab a few markers. Okay. And what you can do is it's a little bit harder to color with markers sort of in a in that jagged fashion, in a blending fashion. But what you can do is you can kind of pick areas. So this is my shape right here. So maybe I just want to fill in kind of turn it this way. So there's my orange. Then maybe I want to try a little bit of this magenta color. Now with markers, you have to be a little bit more careful when you overlap the colors because sometimes, like if I overlapped yellow and purple with marker, I would get a brown because when you mix complementary colors, you get the color brown. But it's okay right here. This red and this magenta are similar. So there's that, and then I'll try one. I'll show you with one more color. Maybe I'm just gonna fill this in with orange. Maybe I want to make that a little bit more. I'm coloring in nice and neatly. I want to leave my lines either the black or the white so that they contrast against the colored shapes that are in the background. And I think I mentioned this last week, but when you're outline or coloring, feel free to turn your paper to different angles or positions that are more comfortable for you to work. I think a lot of times we think, oh, we just have to leave the paper in the same position glued to the table, but you don't. And it's fun to kind of move it around and see what's the best angle for you to really do your best work. So I'm finishing up this little bit right here. Okay, so you will probably, I'm going to give you guys half of this week and then half of next week to finish coloring the background because it's going to take quite some time. So this week, maybe think about your color scheme and start working on it and maybe see if you can get about half of it done. And then we'll finish up the last part of it next week, okay? Again, if you have any questions, please feel free, come to the check-in on Mondays at 2:40. You can share any questions, problems, things you're excited about, you want to show. So I'd love to see you then. Have a great week.